Welcome to Cheese in Depth. I'm Michael Landis, and today we have Michele Buster. She's taking us on a taste of Italy. So I want to welcome you, Michele. Thank you so much for coming by, and I'm going to turn it over to you here.
Thank you so much for having me. Yes, I'm Michele Buster from Forever Cheese. We are a company that is specialized in cheeses from Italy, Spain, Portugal, and Croatia. Today, we're going to focus on one particular cheese and region. The cheese is called BiancoSardo. Bianco means white, and Sarda refers to Sardinia. So we'll talk about this particular cheese and other cheeses from Sardinia. And then we'll talk about pairings, things that go well with cheese, why we chose these specific fun things to go with it. Maybe you'll find some of them not to your liking because pairings still, while they have a bit of science, it's very subjective. And I find that to be the fun thing in what we do in food, that so many things aren't absolutes. No matter what someone says, you must do this or you have to do this. It's more about subjectivity. I brought some friends along when you're out there. I have some sheep with me, and I had my little sheep jacket on just to keep the mood. This is just a selection of some of the cheeses that we do. This is the cheese that those of you who have decided to pick up the different products here. This is the cheese that we're going to discuss. And as I said, it's called BiancoSardo. It is from Sardinia. If you look at it there, the paste of the cheese, there's a lot of grain to it and this beautiful rind. We'll see more about that later. This is very typical in Southern Italy to do cheeses in like a basket. The island of Sardinia is famous for generations of making sheep's milk cheeses, young, firm, every which way that you can do. This is one of my favorite cheeses too, because it's very flavorful. It's not overly salty. It gives you wonderful textures. It's something that you could shave. It's something you could grate. It just has so much versatility with it. And I had fun because I called the producer Ireneo, and we were talking about this cheese too. I said I was going to talk about it. They call him the magician. Before we continue, because I'd love you to see some of what Sardinia looks like, learn about the sheep, I thought it might be fun to just discuss for a moment cutting cheese, how we handle cheese. I don't know whether I'm talking to consumers, to people in the industry, but there isn't just like one way to cut a piece of cheese. So one of the ways I like to handle a cheese like this is I call it like ripping a cheese. So we have a short little video of some of my quality control people taking a manchego wheel, scoring it and showing you what it looks like. And we do this when we're building displays. So we want to make cheeses look like in different ways, have textures. Two, you can use this on a cheese counter to catch people's attention. At home, when I have people over and I want to make a nice cheese display, and I take a cheese that has the textures of BiancoSardo, I love to just break this cheese so you see all the gorgeous textures in it. In fact, that other slide showed some of it. And it also comes in handy for our cheese plate. So let's show you how we actually crack one of these wheels. It's very important to have like a sharp scorer so you can take and just mark the cheese on all sides of the wheel. If you only do one side, then it's not going to break evenly unless you have a lot of strength, and sometimes people will just do it without, but it's better to make it more even when you do it like this on all sides. Then on a smaller wheel like this, you can just break it off the side. If it's a bigger wheel, sometimes you might have to put the tip of the knife in and break it apart. But you see, look how gorgeous that is. This is like my favorite way to show cheese. It won't work so well if you have a 1 or 2 month or 3 month age cheese, but from 6 months and above, it is definitely, a great way to show it. And then you can cut it down again. And then when we get into like how that looks on a cheese plate, I did a little bit of I'm just going to show my cheese plate here. Here we have just how I just took a knife with a point and just chiseled with the knife, which is here. Now, this is one way of showing cheese on a cheese plate where you have it nice and chiseled. And I don't know, I have to figure this out. Usually I have a whole screen, so I'm doing something silly. So I'll look at it in a second. Other ways that you can do it is to cut a triangle from a piece of cheese, or if you bought a triangle and you just make a triangle like you see so much with a manchego. I learned something when I was in the Cayman Islands, and that's making a tic-tac-toe board. So that's doing something like this. You make little matchstick pieces. Can be thin, fat, everything that you go, and then you just make yourself a little tic-tac-toe board. And it looks really pretty. Sardinia is an island off the coast of Italy. It has a rich tradition everywhere around this island. I'm going to be doing a class on Croatian cheese in 2 weeks, and I find that island cheeses all have this same thing in common, is as you're driving around the island, like in all the little producers, there's just little signs everywhere that says, this one will say, formaggi for cheese, or fiore sardo, pecorino sardo. Those are very big, important cheeses to the island of Sardinia. Pecorino sardo means sheep from Sardinia, or Sardinian sheep cheese. And it's both a DOP, meaning denomination of origin, so a protected name, as well as just a general terminology for tons of cheeses that are sheep cheeses made from Sardinia. So they're pecorinos from Sardinia. And then there's a DOP cheese, which is the fiore sardo, which is very typical from the island, which is generally anywhere from 6 to 12 months and very often smoked. So as you drive around this island, no matter where you go, you're seeing little signs and little teeny weeny little places where you could stop and just buy sheep smoked cheeses from the island. And if I'm on Pog, the same thing. So it's super fun. Like every 10 feet, you could go and buy a cheese and you'd be in sheep heaven. For a minute. So this is actually close to the area where my producer makes cheese. Cheeses have different flavor profiles and different personalities for a number of reasons. Terroir is one of them. So where your animals graze, where they grow up, what's around you. And one of the things that when I talked to the magician, he talked about that was so special to his cheese was the arid nature of the area, that his part of Sardinia, which is southwest, closer to Cagliari, and he's close to the sea. So those animals have a very different feed. They're always outside unless they're getting milked. And they're eating underbrush and very little grass, and they have all of the sea breeze that come. And so when I was going to visit, I came across these flamingos, so I thought I wanted to share that with you. This is more of another area of Sardinia, which has a bit more grass. This is thistle. This is another producer of ours who makes raw sheep's milk cheese with thistle flour. So their animals graze more with grass and not so much underbrush. And there's this wonderful wild thistle, although these are dead, that are growing there. And the characteristics of his cheese, because he uses thistle, are much more floral and less earthy and sheepy than the BiancoSardo that you have. This is just another view of the island so that you get some ideas here. I think we have some more sheep coming. There's different type of sheep. The sheep on the island that are the most well-known are the Sardinian sheep. Sardinian sheep produce a lot of milk. It doesn't have quite the butter fat of other sheep varieties. For example, in Rome, the Sopravissana and the Sicilian sheep both have a higher butter fat. So that makes a cheese creamier. So a lot of times in Sardinia, we have cheeses that are very flavorful, but a bit more piquant. So they have a bit more sharpness to them than if they had a sheep that had more butter fat in the milk. It may also depend if they skim the milk or not. So some of the things that I was talking about that make a cheese different again. So we have terroir, we have the animal. One type of sheep is different than another type of sheep. And then of course, the recipe of the cheese baker. Here we have some Sardinian sheep that haven't been shorn. believe me, they look really beautiful like this. Most of the time I see them as little kind of skinny, no hair at all. So look at their face, because we're going to see another sheep that's different too. But this is the breed that, I mean, just for centuries and centuries, this has been a mainstay. And like the cracker that I chose has to do with just the lay of the land and how much sheep had been there and the life of a shepherd. In fact, when I talked with Irenio, the name of the cheesemaker, I said, you know, why are you making cheese? Why did you make cheese? And I mean, he had been a cheesemaker for over 50 years at the same place. And his family were shepherds. And as he was working with his dad in the fields, you know, in his from 10, 11, 12 years, he was like, I don't want to do this. And at 15, he was like, no, I definitely have to do something different. So he went into the military for a while. And then he was like, I think I'm going to make cheese. And he came back and he started to work with at the same place where he stayed until he is now just a consultant, because he's half retired to take care of his mother. But all his life, he's been involved with these sheep and with the land and everything that comes with it. So he has a really long history and tradition of making the cheese. And at home, they used to make cheese with the leftover milk. So that's where he first started learning and practicing with it. Look at that. Yeah, am I kind of crazy for sheep? I am. I can't help it. I mean, I had lamb chop in my crib when I was a kid. So maybe that was foreshadowing, but another 70,000 people had it too. I was really lucky to be here on a day when there were a lot of babies, and I watched some babies being born. And I mean, I don't know what to say. I'm missing it now. I want it back. So here I am. This is actually another part of Sardinia. So if you look, it has a different colored grass. It's flatter. It's less wild. And there's just so many different rich areas where you can have sheep and produce great cheeses here. So I wanted you to see the difference between the Sardinian sheep and another breed. This is the Sopravissana. It's not very easy to find these sheep anymore, and there's none on the island of Sardinia. I took these while I was in Rome. This is actually one of the breeds that's very important into the production of our fulvi, Pecorino Romano, and one of the reasons it's so buttery and not as hard, dry, and salty. But this is a wonderful breed of sheep. You'll find it a little bit in Rome, but there's, like I said, there's just so many different types. You have Sicilians, Sopravissana. You have the pug sheep on the Pagska ovca in Croatia, or you have a Manchega sheep. So those different breeds have different types of milk, different proteins, different butterfat, and that changes the flavor and the nature of the cheese. This is some BiancoSardo on aging racks. The basket weave is used to be, and when they still wicker, and that's what would give it beautiful groove. So it took a lot of learning and time to learn how to do everything in plastic, because things keep getting changed for sanitary reasons, and they didn't like the idea of using wicker. But that was always the tradition, and where Southern Italy put their cheeses to rest, so that they would have these big, beautiful, gorgeous rinds. This is some Fiore Sardo or Pecorino Sardo aging, one of the cheeses I talked to you about that is so integral to this island. I thought it would be fun to show you different shape. So one's from young, aging on here, you can see different levels. All the way off to the right is young cheese. It hasn't grown any mold yet, or it's natural rind. And the ones here, the middle ones is all the mold forming to help form the rind when it hasn't been scraped off. And that just keeps building. And I hope you find that beautiful, because I find this really beautiful. Mold is so important to the development of a cheese. Without mold, for so many different cheeses, it's just really not cheese, because a cheese will be aged in a lot of humidity, just like in a cave. So you have all of that air and that dampness and things like that. So molds are naturally in the atmosphere, and they attach themselves to the humid part of the outside of the rind of the cheese. And you leave them, and so many times if you have cheese here that you see, that is just really clean on it. It's just because it's been cleaned off before it comes here. But there are other cheeses that stay with what we call a natural rind, where the mold is just left on and maybe it'll be brushed. But then the ones that get totally wiped off go through like a big, I call it like the car wash. So it'll go through these big brushes if you're doing a shoe shine. And then you'll wipe that mold off and then you'll package it in a vacuum seal to keep the mold. But the mold actually helps the cheese develop in so many different styles of it. And if mold never grows on cheese when you've had it at home, it's when you should get worried, not the reverse. If you have mold on the cheese, then say, oh, thank God. I know that there aren't a ton of preservatives that somebody's put on here and chemicals. So my cheese is healthy. I'll just take a damp cloth and wipe it off, or I will maybe add some olive oil, and we'll get to that. That's why we have some wonderful olive oil in this too, which is, you probably are saying, you know, why do we have an olive oil as a cheese accompaniment? It's not really as a cheese accompaniment. There are some fun things you can do with it, and then it's just a fun product. This is Verde Naturale, or Pecorino Verde Naturale. The word pecorino comes from the word pecora. Pecora is sheep. Pecorino is the adjective for sheep, so it's sheep's milk. So there's probably 1,000 or more pecorinos in the world. Pecorino Romano, DOP cheese. Pecorino Sardo, umbrella name for Sardinian pecorino cheeses. Pecorino is an adjective for this cheese. This is the raw sheep's milk cheese with thistle flour that we saw from the farm earlier, where the dried thistle was. Wonderfully flavorful. And these are two brothers who have a lot of land. They grow their own thistle and they make this cheese, and they have their own sheep. This is another view of the Fiore Sardo, cut and chiseled the way I was talking to you about. So obviously that's like the 4th time we've seen it. So I think you can tell that I love, you know, cutting cheeses this way. I also feel like that you can really get the textures and flavors better. And with more aged and saltier cheeses, by chiseling the cheese with the grain of salt, the cheese tastes less salty and you get more of the bouquet. Some of the things that, if you've ever seen a wheel of Parmigiano being opened, they open them with those special knives because it releases a certain bouquet to the cheese. And that's really important for you to get. It's better aromas and better flavors when they crack it as a rough cut than if they cut it on a right angle. And we've done some tests with that too. So this is with the cheese. When you do pairings, you usually like to do, there's so many ways you can do them. There's not just one way, but you want to find something that has a balance of acidity and about the same weight as the product. Because if you take a flavorful cheese and you have a very light accompaniment, then it's really just texture and it's not flavor so much. So we try and make the things marry. Sometimes what also happens, if you have a cheese that's very aged and you take something like a honey that's very sweet, it doesn't always add up. Or honey, or it was more or less than a honey. I did like a jam. I did like a tomato jam with an aged sheep cheese. And the tomato jam tasted too sweet and like it had no backbone to it. And then the cheese tasted wrong. So sometimes you put two things together and they just don't work. But let's see what we come up with. When you're making a cheese plate, there are so many different things you can do to create one. Of course, it can be by country. We all think of that. Italy, Spain, France, Cyprus, Greece. But you can do it by milk type, by animal type. So you can do it by, you know, buffalo, sheep and goat, buffalo, sheep, goat and cow. But you could get really technical and scientific and say, okay, let's just do sheep cheeses, but you got to find out what the breed of sheep is. And I want you to bring 5 cheeses from 5 different sheep breeds. So maybe that ends up being 3 countries, or maybe within just Spain, you can find the 5 different sheep. Let's see, you have Churra, Lacha, Gira, Manchega, and Merino. Or you can do it if you think, when you think wine and you say, let me do a vertical tasting. So you do from 1978, 1984, 1961, whatever, when you do that. So you could pick a cow's milk cheese that's young, middle-aged, and aged. Or you could try and pick the same type from different countries. There's all sorts of different ways you can just play with things and not just have it be, one type. So you might pick just cheeses with flavors, either on the rind or inside, or cheeses soaked in wine or soaked in beer. So have fun when you're doing it. A lot of people so often just think of one thing. Other one is texture. Do I have or type of, do I have a washed rind? Do I have a soft ripen? Do I have something that's semi-firm? So anyway, as you can see, there's just so many different ways that we can play and have fun. But hopefully, above all, it'll always be really good cheese. And when it's Mitica or forever cheese, well, you can't go wrong there. Of course not. Okay, so let's talk to you about this special oil for a minute. Here's Mariangela. Mariangela says hello. She was very excited that we were going to talk about her oil. Her oil is having a facelift the next time I get it. I didn't know that when I created this one. But Mariangela took over for her father in 2006. She's coming from three generations of olive oil makers. And I tripped over her on a trip to Calabria about 5 years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And it wasn't my intention to sell her oil because we already have a number of them. But we thought it was just so delicious that it's a varietal that I didn't know about, 100% Carolea. It was her own trees from her own land. And it was a female woman who was she was just so passionate. This was it. She was just so passionate. She was so much like me. And I kept saying, I'm going to find you something. I'm going to find you somebody. And then I was just like, it takes me more time to find someone than to do it myself. For me, oil is super important for the care of cheese. I'm not saying it always has to be like this small farm, boutique, beautiful, wonderful thing to use. But when you have mold on the rind and you don't want to keep it there, you have a piece of cheese that's been open and it gets really dried out, you can take and rub some olive oil on the rind to wipe off some of the mold or to give it a nice sheen. You can take olive oil and rub it on the face of the cheese so that it seeps into the cheese, and then it'll kind of help it go back to life a little bit when it seems a little bit tired. So that's where I really like to use the oil with what I have. And there are traditions to use oil soaking in cheese soaking in oil. So manchego and olive oil. In Spain, they'll take a whole oil of cheese and they'll like perforate it and they'll put it and let it sit in the oil because then it stays moist and it stays delicious for a long time. You can just take wedges. Sometimes they take in Cuba cheese and they put that in oil too to preserve the cubes. It's also kind of like a trick of the trade. You have a cheese that doesn't come out perfect. And so you can just cut it into cubes, put it in a pretty jar, put some olive oil, and you don't have to get rid of it in that way. But of course, we all know how important, how to the diet olive oil is, how good it is for you. And so the fun part is to just take and pay attention to the different flavors that you might have. The Carolea has, a little bit of bitter notes, but it has a lot of creaminess to it, a bit of piquancy. And this year's crop was a very good crop, but a small crop. And depending where you are geographically, you may have in abundance or not. In Spain, we had a very good crop. In Portugal, they had a so-so crop. But this isn't the class to get technical about olive oil. Anyway, but it's just a nice, something that goes with cheese and can make cheese happier and survive again. That's in Calabria where the oil came from. Okay. Look at these trees. I actually met a lady from Calabria 2 weeks ago when I was in Philadelphia, and talking to her, she's 81. She came when she was in school and fell in love, but she had to go back home. And the man in love with her followed her to Italy a year later and proposed to her, and they got married and they went back to Philadelphia and they still run a store at 81 and 84. And Edda's family Some of her relatives come from Maida, the town that Mariangela's from. So I have to call, I sent her a bottle of the oil and I need to see how, what she thinks of it. Hi, Paola. This, everyone, is Paola Calciolari. Paola and I have known each other for over 20 years. And this is a very typical Italian product called Mostarda. And it comes from the center from Mantova. So there's Mostarda from Cremona and Mostarda from Mantova. Both are from the area of Lombardia. And a Mostarda, in Italian terms, is when you take fruit and you candy it and you add a mustard extract. So you get this sweet and sour. And it's really important to eat the juice with the pieces of fruit. Now the plum mostarda has big pieces, so it's good to chop it up a little bit and put it in. But I thought that this was it has a great texture and kind of a voluptuous nature to those plums. Very, very, you've got big pieces of fruit that you can bite into. So pairing it and eating it with a piece of the BiancoSardo, it stands up to it. It also offers that softness in the plum to go with the bit of the firmness of the cheese. And to me, this is just like a wonderful pairing. On its own, something like a mostarda is also famous with charcuterie, grilled meats. I love it with duck. So plum and duck, plum and duck, plum and duck for me is like, sorry, it's sacrilegious to say it might be even better than with cheese, but it's really terrific. But there's a whole history. Paola was a pharmacist. But she loved food. And so she decided to leave pharmacy and to make these mostardas. But I always see it as being kind of a very chemical process still. The mustard extract is actually a hazmat. And you have to use it from sealed drums. When you add sugar to it, it converts it into something edible. And it's really crazy. And a lot of chefs used to say, Michele, just give me the mostarda. I like to make my own stuff. And I'm like, I'm not in the hazmat business. So, and besides, a lot of times this mustard extract just dissipates very quickly. So it seemed like selling it in smaller jars made it easier for them to have that spice, which some people think is like wasabi, but it's the mustard extract with the sweetness that stays for a longer period of time. Paola likes to use only local fruit. Her exception is she has a blood orange confiture, so that she gets from Sicily, of course. But otherwise, she uses farmers in the area to get her fruit, which is quite nice. I think we have some pictures of them cutting up the fruits. This is the area where Paola has her beautiful like casale. It's like a farmhouse, and where she produces it. It's really quite lovely. So here they are cutting up the plums. Then these plums are going to be candied in a vat over a long period of time. And then they will be working for the proper amount of this mustard extract that will go into it. But it's a very labor intensive job. When I said there's two types of mostardas that Italy does, in Cremona, they use the whole fruits and candy them. Whereas in Mantova, it's much more labor intensive where they cut everything down. In this case, the plums are halved, but most of my other fruits, the green tomato, the white watermelon, the crab apple, the pear, they're all sliced into small pieces. Such a fun thing to work with. I just love these. Aha, Gabriele. Yay. Everybody meet Toketti di Pane Carasau. I chatted with Gabriele because I realized I've only met him once. I don't get to Sardinia that often. I'd love to create some more reasons to go. But I had never asked him his history. The first time I went, I wanted to see the production, how it was made. The Pane Carasau part underneath here, the Pane Carasau is the famous flatbread that's unleavened that has been made for centuries to give to shepherds as they go across, as they take their sheep in what we call the transhumance, when they go from one part of the island to the other, from the flat to the hills, as they're traveling, they needed a bread that wasn't going to spoil. So that's where the Pane Carasau comes from. And I said, Gabriele, where are these from? The Toketti name comes from a friend of mine. I forget what his name was that he gave me before, but oh, I know. The first name he gave me, I got slapped with a problem for trademark problems. So I had to change the name. And I asked my friend from Sardinia to help me come up with a name, and he came up with Toketti. Gabriele told me that he was a salesman, and he used to sell these little cracker type things around from a company. But mostly the tradition came from homemade ladies who would, during holiday times, they'd take strips of bread, they'd fry it, and then they'd put it in little bags, and then they would sell it on the streets or take it on picnics. So it wasn't something done on a larger scale. And then one company started to make these little bites, and he would sell it, but he never had enough. And he got really annoyed and said, well, I can do this myself. So he basically just, looked into how do I put a plant together and how do I make this dessert? And dessert, it's not dessert, this cracker. It's basically taking, as we'll see in the other slide, the round pane carasau before it's been fried, cutting it up, flash frying it, adding some salt, and packaging it. And that's that. But they're just, I think they're super addictive. I can't stop eating them. And of course, they're perfect with cheese. I even would like it with the mostarda. They have a great crunchiness to them. Can we go back to the slides so we can show how there's some, we have some pictures on how the product is made. So here we are again in the center where Gabriele is in Sardinia. So it's flat bread. They're going to press it over in here. And this machine is going to cut them into strips. And then it's going to be flash fried. And then they come out as these cool little things. And then I don't know if you can see in the back behind them, they have, how do I explain it? But there's kind of like these little, it's like a little cart, and they're like little compartments, and it weighs it, all of the chips go in the cart, go up and down, kind of like a merry-go-round and a Ferris wheel. And then it gets weighed, and then it goes into the bucket. It's quite fun. It's a very small operation, but they're really delicious. And he never looked back from here. And he does, I only do one variety still, but eventually he does a lot for what it is. I don't know if there's another one, but very happy to work with Gabriele, and he's very excited to have his products in the US. The Pizzuta. Okay, for all of you who love Marcona almonds, and we've always talked about them as being the queen of almonds, and the most expensive. They're not the most expensive almond. This is the most expensive almond. Pizzuta refers to the shape, this pointy nature of the almond. They're flat, they're pointy. Davola is the area where they come from. And this is like having tiny bites of marzipan. This is so cherryish, so softer almond. If you were to fry this, you would kill it, you would break it. These are just so balanced and fragrant and really like music to me. This is something that, in my opinion, when the almond extract came out, it was to try and reproduce this flavor, because these are so rare. It's really hard to find them. And you basically just find them in like the northeast part or on the eastern part of Sardinia. And I went once a long time ago. And yeah, it's not an easy thing for us to sell, but we sell it because it's very typical of Sicily, really very, very different. And we love to sell almonds that are indigenous to the countries that we work with. This is the ultimate almond for a pastry chef. As you can see, just a few with that fruitiness, that cherry flavor, with the savoriness of the sheep, are just amazing. And I don't think they get overpowered by the plum mustard. I think it just all works together. Aha! I know, where's the real honey? There he is with the unshaven. That's Fabrizio. I have to say, I will avoid going out to see the bees as often as possible. I would just do it for him. Wonderful man, one one half of the brothers that make these outstanding, incredible honeys. His name is Fabrizio Cazzola. Pierpaolo is his brother. This is their hobby. They both have other jobs. Pierpaolo works in agriculture, and Fabrizio has a balsamic vinegar company. But they, on their time off, they take their bees, they travel in a truck, they find out where the flowers are that they need to collect. They have to move them at night so the bees don't get agitated. And they are so precise at what flower that they're going to capture, that the texture that you see in your jars, those of you who have it, that texture is like creamy, but granular. But that is the sign of truly great raw honey. He just gets the honey off the panels. It's centrifugal force that it drips out, and you just have this great texture and wonderful aromatics and flavor that sunflower just bursts out. And I'm not a honey person, but I love these honeys there. I just think that they have so much character and flavor. And to me, just having it too liquidy is a little bit too much and very heavy. But that when you get this granular plus creamy nature to it, to me, it's irresistible. And I just made a batch of granola, and I used the coriander honey, which was incredible. But pairing this with the BiancoSardo, I just think that, you know, it actually enhances both. You really get the bouquet of both. They're not overpowered. They exist happily. You know, BiancoSardo is big and bold enough that it can share and have, you know, on each arm a honey and a mostarda. And they also are appealing on the plate because you have the deep purple, and then you have, you know, this golden honey as well that goes with it. So making a beautiful plate with it work very, very much. And of course, honey and cheese is a classic pairing. Sunflower is a less classic flavor. And a lot of the flavors that I learned with Fabrizio, I didn't know that there was coriander honey. I was shocked, and it's amazing. It just, I have to say it's neck and neck with sunflower, but they do like cherry and rhododendron, briar. There's like, they do more than I could even sell. But each time, every single one is just of this amazing quality. And again, they've got to do this on the weekends and in their spare time. And it's become more like they're running two businesses because we've given them so much businesses over the years. And what's funny is to find them. One of my favorite cheesemakers, the Sottocenere producer, was the one who introduced me to them. She always knows the best products all over Italy. And when I told her I was looking for a honey producer, she said, "Oh, you've got to meet Fabrizio." And they're just such good people too. As I said, I was on the phone with him this morning because we changed what the honeycomb box looked like. And we were just talking some logistics about that. But I always call him Mr. GQ, and he wants to wring my neck. But I figure that nobody can sell honey like he can. This is the area where Fabrizio has his plant to process the honey. And this is the countryside around as we were driving through. Not too shabby. Here we go. So where they'll be, no pun intended, will depend on the varietal that they want to collect. They tried to do a little bit of a trick with honeycomb. Like these are the boxes, and when you open up, there are all these different panels. And crazy enough, they make the bees make the honeycomb in little boxes. Bees eat their own honey when it rains. So they tried putting a colony and a plant in the southern part of Italy where it rains less, so that we always run out of honeycomb because we get like a period of rain and then the bees just keep eating the honeycomb out. And they thought, well, maybe if we go here and then do a production more in the south, then we'll have, you know, more honeycomb. But it didn't work out. It didn't work. But these are the boxes that come on and off the trucks. They get covered to move the bees at night. And then, you know, they go to work. And of course you have to wear this that outfit like I had on, because literally we went to film a documentary that is on the original fair on PBS. It's still on there, I think. And the girl was there. She was like, "Oh, I don't need a suit. Really, I'm just fine." And we're looking at her like she's crazy. And she's like, "Really, I'm fine." And then we went out there and you're swarmed by all these bees and it's frightening as hell. And of course she got stung. So that episode ended abruptly. And I don't even think this part made it on because she wasn't happy. Anyway, question. Aha, there was a question. I'll go there too. What kind of meat would I pair with the cheese? What kind of meat would I not pair with the cheese? So you could prosciutto, prosciutto cotto, cured hams from Spain, a great salame, a sopressata. Like I said, charcuterie is also great with that plum mostarda. So a duck prosciutto would be really fun with the plum mostarda and also the biancosardo. You could, but really there is no specific way of going bad with that. So thank you too. But I do hope that, you know, you've enjoyed today. I really enjoy talking to people. I actually enjoy talking to people. So it's kind of, I wish I could see you all. Hi to those who I know, and thank you for participating. Thank you really for enjoying it. We love everything we do, every single product, you know, we love, we work directly with all of our producers. It is more than just a livelihood for us. For us, each product is, you know, linked to the person behind it. And in this whole pandemic and everything that's going on, we reached out to them a lot. We asked people to do videos so that our customers could know how people were doing. But Forever Cheese is nothing without our producers. And I do encourage you as well to tune in next Wednesday and the Wednesday after for our Spanish and our Croatian class.
And, you know, just the relationships that you have is so amazing. Being able to talk about the people behind each of the product is so important that a lot of people don't realize. You know, you go to the store, you buy a product, and this is a great example that there's a real person behind this, but it's not just a person, it's also their passions that are behind it. You know, and that makes so much of a difference about that particular product, and what you bring is phenomenal. So thank you very much for your passion and your ability to bring in these great products.
Well, when we were talking, I mean, what I thought was really important during the pandemic was I sent a letter from all the people at Forever Cheese, thanking each of our producers for risking their lives every single day to go to work to make cheese for us. Like we did not want for product. We got product all the time. We have trouble now. There's a backup at the port and there's boats parked off of Long Island, but that's not because of the pandemic. The port's busy, but these people just continue then and now to just go to work to make the product. So I let them know that, hey, we don't just talk about your cheeses, or we don't just talk about your toketti or anything. We talk about you. We celebrate you, because without you as the people making this, we wouldn't have anything. And to me, that's what I always want people to get. It's absolutely the face behind the product.
And you do that very well. Your presentations are always exceptional in bringing to life the product, but also bringing to life the person and the people behind it. And that's really important. And those nice relationships that you have, 20 years with some. So that means a lot to, you know, when you are representing a product and or we're buying the product, we have a great confidence in you. So
it's a marriage. For better or for worse. Well, no, if it's too long for worse, you're gone, because you've got to be great to be part of our line. So, but thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to seeing you next week. And Absolutely. Those of you who signed on for next week too, thank you so much.
All right. We'll see you next Wednesday, and this will be for our visit to, where are we going? We're going to Spain.
Spain. We're going to La Mancha, actually.
Ah.
We're
Okay.
going to La Mancha and a sheep cheese that looks like manchego, but it's not manchego, but it's made with saffron. And
All
it's actually really delicious. So,
All right. I'm looking forward to it. So, Michelle, please be safe and, be careful out there. And we will see you next week. So thank you so much.
bye.
All right.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Have a happy holiday.
All right. You too. Bye-bye.